Blackwell Fields isn't just controversial, it's a warning shot. Today we're unpacking a mess. The good ideas buried underneath, the structural problems holding a map back, and the larger crisis Blackwell exposes about Battlefield 6 map direction. Let's take a walk through the fields they planted and see what's actually growing out there. A Battlefield map shouldn't divide a community this quickly. A Battlefield map shouldn't force players into one narrow playstyle just to survive. And a Battlefield map should never make a veteran player step back and ask, what in the blue hell is this? Blackwell has potential, and I do mean real potential, but it's being smothered by a design philosophy that keeps creating the same screw-ups across multiple spaces. Blackwell's controversy isn't about any specific theme, art direction, or visual quality. Visually, the map looks good. When I first started playing it, I liked it a lot. The setting worked, the atmosphere was strong, it looked bigger and open. Now, not big enough for jets, but bigger nonetheless. The problem isn't what you see when it's presented, it's what you see once you start playing it. The playable envelope the space players can realistically move in is the true battleground, and Blackwell constricts that space in ways that Battlefield has historically avoided. Now, as a side note, the pendulum was swung the other way of this discussion back in Battlefield 4. Giants of Corellia come to mind. But if you're always on the strong side of Blackwell, you may not notice these issues. But half the lobby is forced through certain approach lanes and checkpoints every match, and this footage shows exactly what they experience. It creates narrow routing disguised as open fields, angle stacking from predictable ridge lines, long crossing zones with minimal safe approach options, a valley layout that punishes anyone not already in a specific position, engagement ranges that compress a supposedly large map into a close-quarter combat chaos. Even players who like Blackwell admit it feels inconsistent. The real question isn't, is Blackwell a good map or a bad map? The real question is, what does Blackwell reveal about where Battlefield 6 is heading? Because this map didn't appear by accident. Blackwell is the product of design decisions made months ago. Tightening map geometry, speeding engagements, compressing mid-range play, increasing reliance on suppressors and first-frame visibility, prioritizing immediate combat over potential depth. Blackwell is the clearest example yet of how that new experiment is playing out. And once you see the pattern, you can't really unsee it. Let's break this down. Just a clean tactical analysis. Blackwell's issues fall into 5 major categories. Now, none of them are unfixable, but all of them are symptoms of a design philosophy that I personally believe needs a little recalibration. The first one is that it pretends to be open while actually being linear. Now, at a first glance, Blackwell appears wide and spacious, and I mentioned that earlier. Large fields, open terrain, clear blue sky, well, not blue, but a clear open sky, long lines of grassland. But practically, there's really only 2.5 routes that actually matter. The rest is decorative terrain. Whenever players try to push deeper into the map to take an objective, they run into out-of-bounds walls far too close to the fight, sniper lines you cannot counter due to elevated differences, valley angles that punish movement with no counter angles, terrain that punishes players back into the meat grinder. So players converge into the same channels every match. This creates a congestion, predictable firefights, and fragility under pressure. A false sense of chaos that's really just spatial compression. Battlefield maps thrive when open spaces matter. Blackwell's flanks look like choices, but they really aren't. They're illusions. The second, mid-range sightlines are interrupted on purpose. The map looks like a mid-range map. It really does. Its art direction screams mid-range gunplay. Its terrain layout suggests mid-range pacing. But the firefights tell a different story. The map is loaded with micro rocks, ankle-high cover nodes like grasses and flowers, knee-high obstacles, sightline breakers positioned every 15 or 20 meters or so. Small environmental clutter that just interrupts clean engagements. This produces the signature complaint. Why does this map feel claustrophobic even though it's outdoors? And that's not by accident. Battlefield 6's design philosophy compresses engagements to emphasize the faster reactions, the break and peak timing, visibility windows under half a second, and of course we circle back to that SMG dominance at mid-range distances. Blackwell isn't naturally claustrophobic, it's artificially nudged into a close quarter combat. And because the clutter isn't evenly distributed, mid-range rifles feel punished for existing. The sequencing, not the size, undermines the map. Then you have another one. Spawn positioning collapses once one team gains momentum. And one team can gain that momentum really quick. And here's where players feel the pain immediately. When one team captures the upper ridge lines and secures that forward momentum, that match tilts and tilts hard. Suddenly, one side is forced into open retreat or reposition. Flanking options shrink to nearly nothing. The dominant side's sightlines overlap. Crossings become exposure zones. Retaking ground requires almost impossible timing. I cannot tell you how many times I've been on this map. Somebody goes push, and we all get wiped. And we've tried this multiple times. This creates several common experiences. The getting wiped in 3 minutes. Every push is a suicide run. There's no angle that isn't already held. We're spawning into firing arcs we can't reserve. And the underlying issue is a directional sightline imbalance. One side's approach, particularly through the central crossing, is exposed more often and more harshly than the opposite side. And not because players are bad, not because one team outclassed the other, but because the terrain and elevation favor one direction of push more consistently. Battlefield has had unbalanced maps before, and this is not new. But Battlefield 6's fast TTK and compressed mid-range amplify imbalance severely and dramatically. Once one side on Blackwell tilts, it's rare, if ever, that it tilts back. It's one of those Battlefield maps where you often find yourself rolling your eyes when you're on a specific side of the map as opposed to the other, from start to finish. Now you got cover density is also inconsistent and it breaks the flow of the game. Some zones have excessive environmental clutter. Others have the opposite problem. Empty fields where a single muzzle flash deletes you. The problem isn't density alone, it's distribution and function. Cover that interrupts sightlines too often, cover that doesn't support advancement, cover that creates lopsided angles, cover that protects one team's movement but not the others. There's also the cover that encourages stationary play instead of the dynamic repositioning. Generally, depending on which side of the map you're on, you either have that opportunity to have the stationary play, or you're on the other side and you're constantly repositioning and not a lot of headway. It's extremely imbalanced. Battlefield was supposed to learn this lesson from early Battlefield 2042. Battlefield 6 was supposed to improve upon the legacy, but Blackwell reintroduces that same mistake. It's not about more cover, it's about purposeful cover. Cover should let players move, enable pushes, build some tension, provide some counterplay, and allow for resets and repositioning on both sides. Blackwell's cover layout frequently does the opposite. And the last you have that the map doesn't know what class or weapon it wants to be used in. Blackwell unintentionally tightens the ideal engagement range between SMG, and I say this in air quotes, territory, or sniper territory. And the result? Well, assault rifles struggle to keep up with the rhythm. LMGs often feel too slow. Marksman rifles feel punished by clutter, especially from one side of the map. Precision weapons lose their value, again, from the other side of the map. And again, like I said, SMGs thrive even at distance they traditionally shouldn't. You can aim first, you could read the terrain correctly, you could flank smartly, you can land shots accurately, but the map doesn't reward tactical sequencing. It rewards first frame reaction, suppressor abuse, instant visibility advantage, rate of fire, pre-aiming predictable angles. Generally, one side of the map is pretty much going to know where you're coming from all the time. This doesn't make the map bad. it makes the map philosophically compressed. Every Battlefield player has had this moment on Blackwell. You flank correctly, you read the flow, you use the terrain, you ADS first, and you shoot first. And you still lose the duel in a fraction of a second. It's not you. It's the map's interplay with Battlefield 6 tuning. The map rewards pixel timing, rapid direction shifts, pre-aimed choke points, the aggressive SMG pushes I alluded to earlier, low visibility setups, moment-to-moment reaction speed. It punishes tactical maneuvering, mid-range accuracy, coordinated team pushes, again, mentioned that earlier, crossfire planning, long flanking routes, patience and positioning discipline. The long-term Battlefield veterans in the room, the players who approach Battlefield with tactical expectations, felt this immediately. Blackwell is tuning the fight instead of letting players tune it themselves. And that's the real problem. This isn't a disaster map. It isn't a write-off. And the map isn't bad. It's just revealing. It exposes the underlying direction Battlefield 6's map design is drifting towards. Tight reaction windows, compressed flanks, forced proximity, predictable sightline control, high lethality for stationary players, even if stationary is extremely brief. And then limited self-directed play. That's the real crisis. Not the map. The philosophy behind the map. As I said earlier, Blackwell has real potential. You could see the vision in the terrain. You could see the intention in the layout. You can even see the ambition in the vertical layering. But the map shipped with several constraints that can be corrected, and correcting them would ripple outward towards Battlefield 6's entire map philosophy. And here's just what it needs to happen. Expand the flank boundaries by 10 to 20%. Players need real room to maneuver. Not the appearance of flanks, actual flanks. Moving the out-of-bounds walls back even slightly opens an alternative approach route, counter angles, pressure redistribution, more dynamic repositioning, and reduces lane congestion. Battlefield thrives on flanking play. Blackwell can reclaim that with modest boundary expansions. Add counter angles on the outer ridge. Right now, the ridges overlook too much of the central flow with too few counter positions. Adding a secondary elevation pocket or interruptive cover nodes, counter sniper angles, mid-elevation shifts, this would all prevent the dominant side from snowballing and making the map feel less one-directional. This is a philosophy fix, not a cosmetic fix. And then reseed purposeful cover in long crossing zones. This doesn't mean adding clutter. It's just meaning that you're adding with intention. Cover should support pushes, break predictable angles, protect movement, not camping. Give mid-range rifles a fighting chance on the other side of the map. Help weaker teams regain control. Long crossings shouldn't feel like a firing squad. They should feel like battles. And then add one more mid-range lane. Right now, Blackwell has one main lane, one off lane, and for situational use, one half lane. That's not enough for Battlefield scale. Adding a mid-range corridor with defined cover nodes splits the pressure and opens fresh game flow patterns. It would also reduce SMG overdominance, let ARs and DMRs breathe a little bit. It would improve the pacing, add replay value through variation, clarify sightlines on the valley floor. The valley floor is the most punishing part of this map. Not because of the terrain, but because the sightlines are ambiguous. Players often don't know where engagement ranges begin, where cover ends, which angles are safe, when they've moved into exposure zones. Clean sightline definition would drastically reduce frustration and increase control. Reevaluate suppression, visibility fog, and micro obstacles. These three systems combine to artificially compress Blackwell's engagements. Tweaking them, even modestly, would reduce SMG dominance, allow more weapon identity to function, increase readability, It would improve brake and peak balances. It would support mid-range firefights. Again, Blackwell doesn't need to be rebuilt. It needs to be retuned. And if DICE applies these lessons to future maps, the entire Battlefield 6 landscape improves. Blackwell Fields isn't the worst map in the franchise, not even close. But it is the most revealing. It shows exactly where Battlefield 6's map philosophy is drifting towards, and exactly where that philosophy needs correction. The good news? Well, the map is fixable, and the lessons it teaches can make the entire game stronger. Tell me how Blackwell plays for you. Is it domination? Is it frustration? Or somewhere in the middle? And before you roll out, I would appreciate it if you would check the description in this video for this month's Military Support Spotlight, MSGA, Military Support Groups of America. Share it, learn about it, or support it however you can. Thanks for watching. And until the next one,